Good morning. Good morning. It is episode 200. That seems quite shocking. Actually, quite shocking that 200 Tuesdays ago was when I first uploaded that video. A lot's happened in 200 Tuesdays, hasn't it? Anyway, it is the beginning of February at the moment, and it is surprisingly warm. I mean, it's not balmy, and the sun's not out, but it isn't freezing cold. And what with this being episode 200, I did promise that we would do a bit of a look back at the history of Plot 37, and that is exactly what we're going to do. And seems as it's not blooming freezing up here, I thought Mum and I would just sit down and start with a bit of a chat about the beginnings, the very, very beginnings of the Sheffield family taking over Plot 37. So I've been having a look through like the records, or the official records of the allotment via the council, and I can tell you that the date that this allotment was signed for by Mum and my dad was the 11th of October 1989. Quite a long time ago. So, I mean, obviously I was there, but I don't have a great memory of that time. So, like, why did you take on an allotment?
We had no intention of taking on an allotment. We went out for a walk one Sunday afternoon, and as we were walking up to Richmond Park, we noticed this gate was opened. So we just wandered in to have a look and discovered that there were allotments there. So
yeah, because our allotment site's really hidden. Like, you can't. A lot of allotment sites are kind of along railways and stuff, and you can see them from a distance. But this one's really like secluded and hidden. So.
And I think it was Colin who thought, oh, that would be a good idea, because he can always find something for me to do.
Colin's my dad, by the way.
And so he just went about arranging it. And this site wasn't well known, and we didn't have to wait for one.
No.
We just went and saw the woman, and she said yes, and here's the keys, and we started almost what date was that we got it?
October.
So we did a little bit up until then,
yeah.
And then Colin hurt his knee or something. We had to stop, and then we got a warning notice to say you're not doing enough, and that was the Easter of the following year.
Okay.
And we spent the whole of the Easter weekend clearing and doing as much as we could.
Yeah.
I think the platform had already been put up. But
hang on, we're getting well ahead of ourselves now. I haven't even talked about the platform yet.
Anyway, so we started, and then it continued from there.
Right. So obviously you heard about the platform there. Luckily, my dad likes to take a lot of photographs, and so from those early days, we've actually got quite a lot of photographs of what they were doing on the allotment at that time. And the platform that Mum's referring to is when you first had the shed.
Yes.
So my dad was a builder. His first thing to do was to build a platform to put the shed on. So it was like a decking. And yeah, so this is what it looked like. That photo is from a little later. You can see there's more beds sort of as you go down, but that was the platform. And it was about here. So there was a gap at the back. So it was right up this first bit where you come in. And yes, that is Mum and I in the picture. So that was the first thing that went in. But then very, very quickly, the first thing he did was put raised beds in. Actually, hang on, going back slightly, one of the things I do remember from when you first took this plot on, so it was just grass, you know, like most people who take on an allotment plot, it's just grass and you have to kind of start from that point. And it was here, but it was also a massive amount of poppies and lupins.
Yes.
It was incredible, wasn't it? But you will have heard me talk about lupins. I can't grow lupins for love nor money because the slugs eat them. But up here,
the whole thing was just poppies and lupins.
It was amazing.
And some asparagus.
And was there asparagus already here?
Except I didn't know what they were.
Oh.
I started pulling them out and then realised
they look like something.
They look like something.
Okay, but apart from like the general state of the plot, you can see really early on from the pictures that the raised beds went in immediately. Why did you go with raised beds? Can you remember?
I can't remember why. It must have been something that Colin had seen.
Right.
And so, and also it made it easier to manage. So it was still working full time. You could set yourself a task, so you either weed the bed or
it was segmented.
Yes,
yeah.
Just made it much easier for me to.
So other than the original digging out of the couch grass, or as much of it as you could get out, really with the raised beds going in, it's essentially been a no dig setup, right from the 1990. And also it was all made of scaffold boards, which at the time was super cheap. What with my dad being a builder, he did have access to knowing that scaffold boards were a good option for that. But something else you'll notice from the very, very first pictures, and it does continue for a long time, carpet. So where we've got grass paths now, my entire childhood, the paths were laid with carpet, and it really makes me laugh the number of people I see taking over allotments, and they're kind of abandoned, and they're all just grass. But when they start digging, what they find underneath is just masses of carpet, and they're like, why the hell is there carpet on the allotment? Well, I'm here to reveal to you that it was the done thing in the early 90s. And actually, my whole childhood, the paths up here were carpeted. Yes. And in the summer, I remember, one of the things I remember so much is that hard, crunchy, hot, dry carpet underfoot, barefoot. And also when the slugs in the summer used to kind of crawl out from the bed and try and go between beds, if they went over the carpet, they dried out halfway along, so it's super absorbent. So it's sort of, the carpet would be kind of encrusted with these dried out slugs all the way. Do you remember them? Yeah. It was pretty awful, it was pretty gross. But that is why you find carpet on allotments, because it was you couldn't just whiz out and buy weed-proof matting. That wasn't a thing. And carpet was it's just what you had on the allotments. And unfortunately, what happens is that most people, when the carpet starts rotting, or you've got to replace it, or you decide you don't want carpet paths anymore, instead of piling it all up, putting it in the back of your car and taking it to the dump, they didn't. They just piled it all up and put it somewhere at the back of the allotment to be found by somebody 10, 15 years later. And I can tell you exactly the same thing happened to me, because when we get round to, I'm going to go through some of the changes that the allotment plot's been through, because it's come through a lot of different stages. But when I came to kind of take this, because this end of the allotment was pretty much nothing was happening down here, then I found out why when I decided to put the shed here, because all of this area was just buried carpet. So I feel your pain, but this is where the carpet thing comes from. Yes. There we go. And you will notice in the photos as we go through, the carpet stayed a long time. So I noticed it, I don't remember this particularly, but I noticed that in the photographs, really quite early on, you got that greenhouse, that little proper glass greenhouse. That must have been quite exciting.
It was a birthday present.
Oh, was
from
it?
My father.
Did Grandad get the greenhouse? Yes. Wow.
And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that was a major start, because we didn't really have enough room at home to start things off. No. And so that fitted in with the plan. Yeah, and it was a cute little greenhouse. Yeah, look at it, it's tiny. Tiny. But you've got the little pond out the front, and it looks really sweet. And that greenhouse actually had quite a life, didn't it? Because it started off halfway down the plot in the middle, and then it moved to the side, and it had a bit of an accident with a tree. But at the time, so we're right on the path here. At the time, the school that's over there, it's now quite a nice school, but at the time, the school was an absolute nightmare of a school, wasn't it? It was, yeah. And the kids used to throw stones. So obviously the greenhouse, when it was in the middle of the plot, was quite safe. But when it was moved to the edge, the kids used to throw stones at it and smash the glass. And I remember that, Yes. Yeah. But eventually, a tree from the school, luckily, landed on it in a storm. And so they actually paid, the current greenhouse we've got now is the one that they replaced it with, wasn't it? Yes. Yeah. Which is why our greenhouse is where it is. Probably not the best place in terms of kind of sunshine
and getting the right light and all that kind of thing. But actually it was placed there to keep it away from the kids. So that's why our greenhouse is all the way over there. And we do talk of changing it, don't we, sometimes? So like when we're feeling particularly ambitious. But yeah, moving a greenhouse.
We've run out of space, I think.
Yeah, we don't really have anywhere to put it now. So that was the first part of the allotment. So you started at that end and then sort of slowly worked your way down here. And then this patch here at the end where we're sitting now became a really huge fruit cage.
It did, yes.
I think it had a couple of apple trees and a green gauge.
And it may have even had a peach, I think.
Did it?
Yes, we only ever got one peach.
One peach of it. But it had
before it got
peach curl or something, did it?
Yes.
Yeah. And we had raspberries down here, I remember that. So these two apple trees that we've got here, this one and this ballerina here, these were both in the original fruit cage. These are, the last remnants of what was inside that fruit cage. Hey girlies, I know! They've been here a long time, they have girls, yeah. Yeah, so that was the whole bum end of the thing. But you'll notice in the photos that the site itself is so much more open. And it's amazing looking through the old photos because the trees, like you can see them, they're little baby trees. Massive now. The whole plot, and actually the whole site, is just surrounded by trees these days. It never used to be like this, but now you just can't see out of the edges. But there's a couple of trees in there, like major ones, which aren't even existent. And you'll notice that the oak tree, which is now a big feature in our plot, right on top of us here, wasn't here at all. And that is because we rather foolishly planted it ourselves.
It was growing somewhere in the allotment.
Yeah, it came on the new. So at this stage, we've only got plot 37. So actually, a secret, we're actually plot 37 and 36B. We have got the other half, but at this stage it's just plot 37, and you can see that the pathways along the edge of the plot are much more open, and we don't have all those trees along there, and that was the edge of the school. And so this half of the allotment was quite usable at that stage. But as things started progressing, the trees started growing, not including our oak tree, that was our own fault, but the trees and the school side started growing. This edge of the allotment became much less usable because of the tree roots just suck everything out of that side of the allotment. So that's why you took on the other half. So we kind of shifted the whole lot over, and you'll notice even now, like all of our buildings and things are all on this side. So we've got the shed, the chicken house, the polytunnel, the pond, and sort of the netting shed and stuff are all on this edge because it is the least usable part of the allotment because everything's just sucked out of the ground. But that meant that we took on the other half. Yes. So in terms of getting your bearings, from this point this way was the original plot. This is plot 37 on this side up to the fence there. So this was the original patch. And then this side, from this path over, this is the extra half we've got. So this is actually 36B on this side. But you can see that whereas originally, like this was the central path, we had either side here, this side of the allotment has slowly become less and less usable because of the tree line. So yeah, the whole allotment has basically like shifted across, and this is now our central path with all of our buildings and things down this side where the ground is less usable. And that's where the oak tree was growing. It's just, you know, when you get them with the acorn and it's just got a little tree growing up, well, we'll stick that on the edge of the plot.
Yes, I mean, it's the furthest point away, but
yeah,
I didn't realise it was going to get so big so
you
quickly.
Think, yeah, oak tree's very slow growing, slow growing. Not that slow growing.
No.
And the other tree, which was a big feature, is a cherry tree that was right up that end of the plot. That was here when you got here, wasn't it?
Yes.
That's where we put the shed, was underneath that cherry tree. And yeah, it had a swing in it, as you can see in this photo. Yeah, it was a great, it was a great cherry tree.
And it was a really lovely tree till it got struck by lightning.
It got struck by lightning?
Yes. That's why it's not there anymore.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No.
I did not know that.
Well, you've seen how split that trunk is.
Yeah, I didn't know it got struck by lightning. And this here little tree stump is what's left of that cherry tree. I had no idea that it was taken out by lightning. I remember that it was pretty old and it had lost a couple of limbs. The branch that had my swing on was long gone. But yeah, this is the last remnants of that beautiful cherry tree. And the swing was about here. It was, I remember the tree because it did fruit like crazy, but they weren't like big fat cherries. They were like, you know, the really small yellow with like a blush sort of cherry. I didn't know it got struck by
What's
lightning.
interesting though is if you look into the school, there's a cherry tree there, which is obviously a runner from
from its root, because it's exactly the same.
So
Wow.
that's why we don't.
That's why we don't have the tree anymore.
Yes.
Oh, I don't need to wait for the plane. That's pretty good. So interestingly, talking of the fruit cage that was down this end of the plot, this isn't the first time that Plot 37 has actually been on the screen. I mean, now obviously it's just YouTube, but briefly, my dad was on, he did a program, it was with the BBC, wasn't it? And it was a segment in, I don't know if you remember, in like the 90s, there was a big thing for like home improvement stuff when we had like changing rooms and all of that kind of program. Well, he did a segment in there, so he sort of made things, made hanging baskets, made all sorts of stuff. But in one of the episodes, it's filmed up here on the allotment, and he builds a fruit cage. And now I haven't seen this since I was a kid. Funny, so I'm just going to leave you for a minute with a bit of Colin Sheffield on Plot 37.
And this is where we grow our soft fruits and apples and pears and things.
It's very professional.
Well, it's really only made out of roofing burners. I mean, the professional ones you buy cost absolute fortunes, but in fact, this is quite cheap.
But it must still cost a lot of money.
I can show you how to make one of these for about £65. Would you like to have a go at that?
Right.
Okay, let's do it. And here's our kit of parts that we need to put it all together. These pieces of metal are hammered into the ground to, form a foundation and anchor the system. It's held together with these pieces of metal angle in between these in line.
Right, these are all finished.
Okay, that's enough, because the wood's very soft. Okay, gentlemen, we're ready to put these on now. You can hold that up there.
What is this?
This is the same sort of timber as that. It's roofing timber, valley boards. So these cable ties. And this again is part of my interest in the building trade. These things actually use to hold electrical cables together. And in fact, ideal for holding netting. Okay. Okay, Jan. That's just about it. What do you reckon?
Yeah. I think it looks pretty good.
I reckon that's not a bad afternoon.
It's blooming strange, that, isn't it, having the video on here. I mean, it hadn't even occurred to me when we started the videos down here. It was only about, like, goodness me, it was probably like a year into it that Dad was like, do you remember that we had those? Because we didn't have any video footage at all, and a friend of his managed to salvage some, which is why we've now got it. Like, I haven't seen that. If I did see it, I saw it when it originally came out and not in between. So yeah, just really interesting, particularly with like the sped up footage and everything. It's really similar. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that this patch here, which was the top of the second half of the allotment, like the extra bit, this is where that cage was being built, just on this spot. We didn't get to keep it, unfortunately. I don't know where it went, because we never had a fruit cage up here, so it must have just been built for show, not something we do on on our channel. But yeah, so it was here. Bizarre. So when was that? Do you remember when he was filming that?
I can't remember it at all. I mean, I never even came up here when they were here, because it was during the week and I was working.
Ah,
So it was just another little thing that Colin was
doing.
trying. Yes. So no, I didn't. I never saw. I mean, I saw it on the television, but I never saw it.
Never saw it being filmed.
No.
And we don't remember what date that was.
No. No idea.
I think he's still got the shirt though, so It's that lime green one
Yes.
with the short sleeves.
Oh,
You know
yes,
that
yeah,
one.
yes.
So obviously, originally you put raised beds all down this side and that side, but when you took over that half, you didn't put raised beds in.
No.
Why was that?
I think it was the expense because the law changed on how long scaffolders could use
Their boards.
their boards. And of course, you used to be able to get, the old rubbishy ones, but which they weren't using. But once they changed the rules, the boards after 4 years were still fairly good condition, and the price skyrocketed.
Right.
Really, for
So it
second-hand
was-
boards. It was just cost, really.
Yeah.
Mm.
How did you find growing on like a flat piece of land as opposed to in the beds?
I found it much more difficult because I couldn't really. I mean, we divided it by where we had those wooden boards,
Yeah.
that you walk platforms
Yeah.
that you walked on, but it was just when you do weaving or it wasn't divided enough for me, so I found it much more difficult.
Okay. Yeah, it's quite interesting hearing Mum talk about the fact that she found that side much more difficult to cope with when it was just one long strip. Because at some point, neither of us remember this. I mean, I wasn't here, but she doesn't remember it either. This whole section up the middle, like our main drag, was also just one strip. Obviously, the beds fell apart at some point, and this became a strip too. We don't actually know what kind of date that was, although I made all of these beds that we've got here now. It's interesting to see that in the middle there were no divided raised beds on the plot. Yeah, this is what I wanted to talk to you about as well.
Yes.
It's like how much, because you were both working at the time and obviously I was small,
Yes.
and it's quite a big allotment. Like, how much time would you say a week you were up here?
We always spent Sunday morning, so that would be about 9 till 1.
Okay.
And so that's 10 man hours or something.
Yeah, something like that.
So, and once we had it all set up, we could actually manage it just doing it that one day.
Right.
In the summer, obviously, I could come up after work
more,
and do
yeah.
this a bit, but mostly it was just
Mostly it was
Sunday.
just that
Yeah.
Sunday mornings. Wow.
So it's quite, when you've got it all divided up and, you can just target one area and make it, and it's the making a difference.
Yeah, when you come away and you feel like
Yes,
you've achieved
yes.
something, it
Yeah.
does make a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah. So that
It's
was
interesting. So it wasn't really a great time sucker at that time.
no.
I mean, obviously, if you're working full time, having the whole of your Sunday morning is quite a large chunk of time. But yeah.
No, it did. I mean, and it was very productive, and it was.
Yeah, and you'll notice, I mean, it looks incredibly smart in these first sort of 10 years or so, particularly because of the cages. All of the beds, every single one of them had these cages that you'd put over everything, and that is because of rabbits.
Yes.
There was, so I said before that this allotment is like between a lot of things. Well, we're between parkland, cemetery land and school playing fields, and at the time it was, I have no idea what that is. Oh, it was a chicken pecking the tin can. Yeah, at the time it was absolutely overrun with rabbits. So you couldn't put anything out in a bed; it would just be gone in an instant. So everything had to be covered, and Dad built these quite thin batten boxes that went over every single bed, and that was another reason that the raised beds were really good, because you could it was all like fitted to it, and they lifted up one side to the other so you could get inside. I mean, it was really, really good. You would never be able to do that now, cost wise. The cost would be astronomical.
When you
now.
look at it, it's absolutely amazing.
It is incredible, but I mean, slowly, obviously, over the years, they've kind of rotted away or been replaced with other things, and now we've got like the mesh, like arches over things. But yeah, they were pretty snaz.
No, it was a very good system.
Very good system. And it worked against the rabbits.
It did.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what was the mesh that you had on there? Was it like soft mesh or was it hard wire?
No, it was just it was that green. You know the one
the
with,
stretchy stuff.
Yeah, the green stretchy stuff.
Okay. That was pretty good.
Take down.
Yeah.
So it kept them. We still had badgers.
Right.
And
Oh, she had badgers even then.
we even had them then. But they didn't come onto the allotment so much because where their big badger set is, they roam that way up there. But when the cemetery had to build a brick wall to stop them stopping them moving further into the cemetery.
You can imagine badgers in a cemetery is not great.
They then came south.
And that's when they became a problem here. Yeah. So sort of around this time, I was like going to secondary school or whatever, and I wasn't up here very much. I mean, my school friends and stuff used to come up here, but generally, like not up here so much, and then into being a teenager. And then I left Richmond at 15, 16 to go to Reading. So then I wasn't around at all, and barely involved in the allotment for a good, well, would you say 10 years?
10 years probably.
10 years.
Not when you were at university either.
No, because I wasn't living in this area at all, so I wasn't around. But we do have some pictures. And you can see the kind of the allotment sort of slowly evolving into something else. As the problem with the rabbits passed, you can see that the allotment, like the style of it really, really changes from being sort of ultra protectionist and everything's boxed and caged and really well managed. It becomes this much more sort of open site. But I do remember when you got the chickens. Now this was 2012. Why did you get chickens?
Well, that was another one of Colin's ideas. So I said, it might be quite nice. So I booked a course on looking after chickens.
Right.
But of course, as soon as I'd done that, he said, right, I'll build a chicken house. And so we started building the chicken house. I went on the course and realised that it was going to be
more work than you were expecting.
Far too consuming, more work than I expected. And because they weren't, just outside your back door, it was going to be quite involved. But by that time it was too late.
Because he had already built the chicken house. Right.
So
my dad gets a lot of like schemes. He gets an idea for something and then you're often the one who ends up having to do it, aren't you? But they must have. So I remember when you got those 3 chickens. The first 3 chickens were incredible. It was Tracy, Vivian and Frida. And I must have been around a fair bit then because I do remember them. Fantastic chickens. Frida didn't last particularly long. She wasn't very well when you first got her, was she? She was about a year, I think.
Yes.
But the other 2 we had for quite a long time. But that must have really changed your relationship with the allotment.
Yes, it did. I had to spend a lot more time, and also didn't really understand that they put themselves to bed at night and all that sort of stuff.
Oh,
so
I remember that at the beginning.
Come up and close it off at night and make sure they were in there and everything was locked, and then I'd get up at first thing in the morning and come back up and let them out. And I mean, this went on 2 years.
2
probably.
years. You were up here twice a day, every day.
And then I can remember coming up, I was really quite late, and they never even came out of their house, even though I hadn't.
Yeah.
So I think I might be just, being a bit
overprotective mother.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I stopped locking them in. I let them put themselves to bed and get up in the morning.
By locking them in, do you mean so the outer cage?
It
was always locked, like nothing could get in. But they had an extra chicken house box in there that you used to lock the door on them, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, every night. And every morning let them out.
Why? I've no idea.
And I mean, we're close to the house here. It's not like it's like a 20-minute drive or something, but still, twice a day, every day.
Yeah.
That must have been fun.
It wasn't.
No.
Rain,
But it didn't put you off.
Shine. No. I actually enjoy having the chickens here because if I'm spending time here by myself, which is, I quite often do, it's company actually. Yeah.
So obviously we lost Frida quite early, so we had Vivian and Tracy for a long time, and then I can't remember what happened to Vivian, but then we just had Tracy, and Tracy was a wonderful, wonderful chicken. You will have heard me talk about Tracy before because she was like, we've got bantams now, and we've had bantams since that point, but Tracy was like mega red chicken, like a beast. And when we just had Tracy, obviously we couldn't just have one chicken, it was mean. So another guy on the plot gave us Bee and Olive and Horace, who were the most gorgeous Wyandotte Lacey Wyandotte bantams. I mean, they were beautiful. They were beautiful looking, and they were just the loveliest chickens. And I think they're the reason that we always get bantams from now on, because they were just the loveliest chickens.
And when they're out, I mean, when the full-size chickens are out, they tear the place apart. But at
Yeah,
least the
they're
bantams don't dig enormous
No,
holes
they're not quite
everywhere.
as destructive.
Mm.
So during that time, obviously you were up here a lot. I was still in London because I'd come back from France, but I wasn't up here all the time. And then in 2017, I moved back to Richmond. And that's when I got much more sort of officially involved in the allotment. And we were up here a lot before that.
Yes, you were. Because once you were living at home, you
Then
come
I was
up on the
so
nice days. And,
and
did
I was
quite
always
a lot.
trying to. One of the things that I'm really useless at is making a note of when we've done things. You know, like you sew something and then you don't label it, or you can't remember when you sewed it, or any of those. Absolutely useless at it, which is why we started the Instagram account, because it's just like a photo diary of when we'd done things, and it worked really, really well. I can show you the first photo that we put in there was of Mum bringing some pallets onto the plot, the very first photo. But yeah, so like from that moment, we've both been up here a lot, really.
Well, I think with the lockdown.
Well, that was a little while later, so we were up here quite a lot, but I was working full time, or 4 days a week and 1 day from home.
Yes.
You were up here a lot.
Yes.
And then when lockdown happened, obviously the reason that we started YouTube and the actual vlog and all of this business was because I lost my job in lockdown. You were at home, obviously. The weather was incredible. It was that beautiful 2020 spring, which was just outrageously good. And we just spent every day up here, didn't we, for about 3-4 months. Yeah, it was absolutely incredible.
So we never used it socially. Before then, because you could meet with 6 people outdoors, we started to invite friends to come here. Yeah. So
because we don't have much of a garden at home, and our garden, you have to go through the house to get to the garden. There's no back entrance or anything. But you were allowed on allotments. The official guidance was allotments were fine. And then when it opened up slightly, and you could meet with however many people it was, I know the rules kept changing, but you could meet with people. And we used to meet up here because we have quite a few friends who don't have gardens around the area. And we used to come up here. So that also changed the relationship with the allotment. And actually that influenced a lot how we then moved the allotment around, which I'll talk about now, because we basically flipped the allotment, didn't we, at that stage. So this is probably a decent time in the story to kind of go through visually the different stages that the allotment went through early on and what we've done since that point. For the first 2 years of having the allotment, Mum and Dad moved their way down the allotment, down the whole plot, making the raised beds, putting in the new little greenhouse and the pond, and finally ending with a fruit cage at the far end. Then in spring 1991, they expanded sideways and took on another half plot. There's a good 15 years in the middle here where we're not entirely sure where things moved around, but beds appeared, beds disappeared, things shifted backwards and forwards, fruit cages moved around. But then in 2012, we come to this stage where we have got the chicken house in place, we have the original plastic polytunnel in place, and this is at the point when lockdown struck. So this is our current fruit cage, but there was one between this one and that wooden one that was the original one at the end of the plot. And it was made out of these exact panels, but it was next to the greenhouse and it was square rather than oblong. But if you've been following for a very long time, all the way through Instagram and everything, it collapsed. And we were going to replace the roof, but decided it would be better to have it up this end because we were focusing on that end being a bit more of a social spot at that time. It just made sense to bring it up this end. So this is where the current fruit cage is. So something else I have to talk about is our shed and the fact that we moved it down here. It shifted from this top corner where it had been for 25 or so years all the way to the other end of the plot. I think this was a really good move, moving the shed down here for a number of reasons, but also because it is the least usable point on the allotment. what with this huge, entirely our fault oak tree over the top of it. It means that the shed itself is quite well protected because of the tree. It means that the ground underneath it really couldn't be used for anything else. And it gives us a really nice vista sitting here. Because it's got the double doors, like this opens, you know, it's a lovely shed. I love this shed. Yeah, you get the big vista and you can look out, chat to the girls, all the rest of it. Whereas before the girlies, you know, the other end of the plot, and this is just a much more, it's nicer, isn't it, girls? Yeah, I think so. But this shed actually has also shifted around quite a lot of the plot, because when we first got it, we got it secondhand out of somebody's garden who lives two streets away from us at home. And we originally had it on the platform up that end, just as a direct replacement of our old shed. Here you can see it pre-purple. It really did need protecting though, and I think the purple was a pretty good choice, to be honest. But yeah, now it is down here, and I love it. So, in your opinion, do you think it's nice having the allotment this way around with the shed down here?
Yes, it's much better. You could have, you know, it's a nicer view.
Yeah.
Out, you know, and you can see things.
And when you arrive, when the shed's right at your gate, you come in and you go to the shed and that's it. But when the shed's at the other end of the plot, you walk through your plot every time you arrive. So you get to look at all of it, rather than, you know, you often get like the deserted end that you don't sort of go to. You're kind of making yourself walk through the whole lot. You do pay more attention, I think, to the plot.
Whole thing, yes.
Yeah. So as you can see, the whole lot has changed so much from like this early photo all the way through to how it is now. I definitely think the grass paths are an improvement. When I look at it though, I do think it's a shame it's not quite so open, but at the same time we've tried to enclose it, because, yeah, please excuse us for a moment while we have a coughing interlude and a bit of Lily. Right, you're going to have to get off, Fluff. We're recording again now. Go on, off we go. Go on. Sorry, Ronnie Babbit. So yeah, I think it's been a really interesting look back for me as well. I mean, it must be interesting for you, because you were like, I don't remember that being there, and I don't remember that being there. So it's quite nice to kind of to look back over it. But also, one of the things that it's really drawn attention to for me is that I often, if anybody says, you know, would you rather have a garden or an allotment, I'm always very much like, oh, I would love it to be my own garden. Like, I'd love to own my growing space. But as I'm looking back over this, like, I've moved around all over the show. I mean, you've stayed in the same house, but essentially you could have moved and you keep your garden. You know, I think that's a big thing. That, so obviously we've had this allotment since 1989. That is a long time. And in that time you could have moved house, you could have done anything. And yet this is, you think of allotments as being quite transient, you know, with like people coming in and people coming out and it being a rented space. And yet it's not just us on this site either. There's just so many people on this site who have been here a similar amount of time or longer. There's a lot of handover. There are two sisters on the end who took over from their parents who'd been here since the 70s. Yes. Irene up there has had her allotment since 73. There's a couple of people on this bottom run behind us who's had it the same sort of length as us. There's a guy up there who took it over from his father. So yes, they can be quite transient and people come in and leave, but I think there's something quite lovely about it being sort of held on to for that amount of time. It's not just somewhere that you kind of can go and then you leave again. And also when you're working on an allotment or a garden, you're putting all of your effort into that soil, into that area, and you can't take that with you when you go. Like, if you sell your house, you lose your garden. And you can hold on to an allotment in a way that you can't necessarily something like that. So I hadn't really thought about it that much before kind of doing this process, and then looking at the number of people who've been here for this amount of time, and yeah, I think it's quite beautiful, really. This is very much like a family allotment that we've had for a long time, and we will have for a long time more. Okay, well, I think that probably is us done. Although I said for the beginning of February it's not cold, it's not freezing, but we've been sat here for a little while and starting to seize up in the chill. So instead of doing a cheers and stuff up here, what we're going to do is sort the girlies out. We're going to pick some bean tops ready to take home and have some lunch, and we will see. Other than the fact that it's a bit chilly to be out here drinking champagne, it is actually still the morning, and so that wouldn't bode well for the rest of the day if we're already cracking open the bubbly at this time. So we're going to pick some bean tops, which are the actual field bean tops, take them home, have some lunch, and we'll see you this afternoon for a 200th episode. Cheers. Okay. Right, while we've been sitting here doing this, we've got bloody Lily like circling us and running around. All the chickens have escaped. They're just like willy-nilly everywhere, so it's chaos. We've got to go and herd the girlies back in. What are you doing there, Rube? What are you doing there, Rube? What are you doing? Is she a beautiful chicken? Is she good? Is she good? Come on. Let's get those girlies in. Come on, come on. I'll chase her around. Come on, Dumbo. Go on, whoop. Good girl, good girl. Okay, are you ready with your glasses?
I'm ready with the glasses.
Ooh, you are good at it. There you go. Are we about even?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers. Well, that didn't sound very good, did it? They're not crystal. Yeah, so 200 episodes. I don't have the microphone in.
Oh, I'll start again.
So that turned out to be mainly an interview of Mum, which was interesting because I think a lot of those photographs, like, they've just been sort of filed away and haven't been looked at since they were taken. And so a lot of the stuff you didn't remember, did you?
No, I didn't actually. But I mean, the simple things like the swing that we put up
Yeah.
when you were little. I mean,
Yeah.
until I saw that, I'd forgotten totally about it. Yes.
Yeah, so it was nice. It's been really nice, like, looking back through the old stuff and kind of refreshing your memory. But yeah, like 35 years of that allotment is quite something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Down one side, up the other, change this, back, do something else.
Yeah. Amazing how many changes it's. But can you imagine, like, in that time, you put in raised beds, they rot out, you know, they're not going to last more than 10 years, are they? So everything's sort of, changing and evolving. But so basically there wouldn't be any 200 episodes without you lot. So the big thing is to say thank you very much. It's incredible. Thank you to everybody who's even watched just one episode of those 200. It's quite something. So this is a massive cheers to you.
Cheers.
Mm. Mm. It's also, God, that's really nice. It's also a massive cheers to everybody who is in the Monday Club, who are my Patreons, who support this and have kept the vlog going
Yes.
for this long. And I really, really appreciate the support. We both really appreciate the support. So this is... The lights have gone off. So obviously something's trying to tell us it's all over. Yeah, that's it. So I'm just going to say cheers, and we'll see you for 201 next week.
Okay.
Cool. I don't know what that was. Jeez.
Just those?
But I tell you what, looking at the old pictures and then like walking around the plot now and being like, and this is where this was, and this is where this was, it's a bit depressing because it looks like an absolute muddy grey shambles. But I got to keep reminding myself that all the photos are taken from like the middle of summer, and this is February. So that's why it looks like it does. I'm gonna have to hunt down some good photos of the summer to overlay, to make it not quite so awful up here.